Welcome. Thanks for joining us here at SDG Live. We are in Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum annual meetings. And I'm really grateful that the UN Foundation, with the support of GSMA, is elevating the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as part of the agenda here in Davos. I'm Cheney. I'm a reporter for Devex. I cover the role of the west coast of the US and primarily Silicon Valley in global health and international development. And it's a real pleasure to be joined here by Mukhisa Kituyi. He's Secretary General of the UN Conference on Trade and Development. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start with something that's been on the agenda quite a bit here. We're going to be talking about digital technology and global trade for growth. Something that comes up when we talk about digital technologies and what it means for developing countries is the future of work. Right. And there are a lot of concerns about the future of work. We had a story at Devex about how automation is not only going to disrupt the future of work, but also the future of global development. But you seem to think it's not such a doom and gloom picture. So can you tell me more about your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there are two sides to it. First of all, there's the reality that certain forms of employment which can be automated, given the exponential growth of machine learning and robotics, artificial intelligence, are going to be taken over by machines, and some labor will be relocating. Secondly, particularly important for developing countries, is that the model, for example, which has helped East Asia, that when the cost of labor rises in some segments of society, the less developed areas become the destination of those kind of jobs. Now, when reshoring starts happening because of technological breakthrough, the high labor content jobs, which would otherwise have been used in some countries, will now be off limits. But having said that, historically, every technological revolution that we go through displaces labor. But then it creates efficiencies which create alternative livelihoods. So the challenge is, how do we build a capacity for retooling the labor force to adjust to changing objective and subjective production conditions?
Are you seeing those kinds of adjustments that are needed? If it's really about reskilling, and training people for jobs of the future, are you seeing groups that are responding in the way you think they need to respond, or you think we're kind of slow in reacting to that?
I'm seeing some societies which are radically transforming national curricula. For example, that if you look at the knowledge of 5 years ago is history today. And you have to adjust the skill sets in your society to adjust to new labor requirements. Societies which are seeing the important balance between skill set and mindset, that the ability to unlearn what you learned and embrace new knowledge, to adjust to new opportunities and new challenges, and the critical importance of empathy, community engagement, skills that cannot be taken over by machines. These are areas where those at the frontier of adjustment have to apply themselves.
I have to say, I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to speak with you. I feel like there are a lot of sessions in the Congress Center here in Davos where we're looking at this theme of creating a shared future in a fractured world. We're looking at the fourth industrial revolution and what it means for society. And all too often, the anecdotes just focus on US, Europe. We're not hearing what this means truly globally. So tell me a little bit more about what's the perspective you're bringing to Davos, and what is your message? What's the message you're really trying to get out there right now?
I'm the leader of a dedicated United Nations agency, which looks at how to use trade, finance, technology in an integrated way to help developing countries integrate into the global economy. And therefore, our interest on technology, on the digital revolution, on fourth industrial revolution, is not just about celebrating the rising sun. It's about challenges on how do we identify the gaps in skill sets, in local content development capacity, in regulatory infrastructure, in fiscal broadband infrastructure, in the schools curricula, in developing countries that can make them catch up. How can technology offer a leap that helps them reduce poverty and reduce inequality? So these are important questions. Of course, we have two challenges. The first challenge is that most attention is focused on developed economies. Plus China, which is virtually a developed economy as well. But the second is, just like in all matters trade, the narrative of the big boys is what we hear most. And yet the battlefield for creating employment, resuscitating livelihoods, is with small enterprises. So our emphasis, our message to Davos is one, it matters to do diagnostic studies of the gaps in preparedness, electronic commerce preparedness in developing countries. Two, we create a marketplace where social investors, policymakers, academia, and international public opinion leaders can say, we can fill the different gaps together in a way that is measurable with clear results as a way of bridging the divide. If we let some leapfrog to fourth industrial revolution and others are not digitally included, they have no visibility on electronic marketplace, then we are compounding the geographical inequality that we promised only 2 years ago to correct in the Sustainable Development Goals.
Exactly, and this comes up a lot here in these meetings, this idea of leave no one behind, but to your point, the risk is people are left even further behind.
Exactly.
Those who are already behind could be left further behind. I want to go back to something you said. I love how you captured it as, too much focus on the big boys. I agree. So I'm based in the Bay Area, and when we look at the role of Silicon Valley in emerging markets, you're getting some investment into these markets, right? Silicon Valley investors are starting to show some interest, but there's an overemphasis on seeking out the unicorns.
Yes.
Even though, small businesses that are creating jobs are so valuable. So I'm really glad you made that point. I want to go back to your point on e-commerce.
Yes.
So you mentioned something around building an ecosystem for e-commerce. Why is that so potentially transformative, and how do you get there?
Okay, there are 2-3 reasons why. Number one, over the past half decade, we have seen a sustained high growth in electronic commerce globally. For example, e-commerce is growing at 5 percentage points above global GDP. It's the only part of trade that has been growing until perhaps the last 1 or 2 years. And that means that those who are not in this space are massively being left behind. Secondly, e-commerce does not happen by accident. There must be broadband access, quality, accessible, and affordable. There must be skills for trade, for engagement in the digital economy. There must be privacy rules. There must be a payment system. All these are factors that have to be invested into by governments. Now, unfortunately, what we're discovering is that electronic knowledge is like literacy. Those who don't have it are the ones who least see what they don't have. And so we have to say, how can we create a political appetite for investing in a priority way in developing young men and women of the future? In the most vulnerable societies, how do we open the potential of electronic market visibility to grow the small enterprises that are the largest creators of livelihoods in most developing countries? And how can we go beyond hearing the voice of the emerging superpowers, Google, Amazon, Alibaba, and start listening to the voices of those who are small enterprises who struggle, sometimes they fail, and they come up and try again. And those are the real life cases that are most drivers for global inclusion.
I think when we face big challenges, part of what I try to do as a journalist is not just talk about what we could do and what we should do, but what seems to be working and point to that. So are there any things you can point to? What are you excited about?
Exactly. In Nairobi in July 2016, UNCTAD launched a global initiative called E-Trade for All.
E-Trade for All.
Now, the E-Trade for All is an initiative to get corporates, corporations, international organizations, and business commit to 2 things. One, and most importantly, creating a platform to share information about opportunities and challenges for using the electronic marketplace to deal with development problems, particularly unlock the potential of electronic commerce for developing countries. And the second component is business for E-Trade for All. How to mobilize corporations and individual businesses to be members of the family of organizations and business for development inclusion. And the third component is financing diagnostic studies of electronic trade preparedness for developing countries. So these three components, which are now growing very fast, and in the past few months, the World Economic Forum has become a member of our E-Trade for All initiative, are important drivers for pushing partnerships and policy engagement to translate the aspirations of leaving no one behind into actions that leave no one behind.
Love to hear when aspiration turns into action. It doesn't always happen, especially at conferences with so many sessions going in so many directions. But last question for you, and we'll make it very quick. A call to action. You know, you have an audience here that hopefully and seemingly cares a lot about the SDGs and achieving these by 2030. I kind of want to link it back, build the connection between your work and the SDGs, and what's your call to action?
A short 1.5 years ago, the world committed to an ambitious agenda of leaving no one behind. Since then, we have seen certain reversals in international solidarity. The growing calls for my country first, a sense of protectionism and return to mercantilist thinking about international trade, disengagement from multilateral solutions to collective challenges, and even falling back in public leveraging private resources to help enable collective group integrative development. Most important message I have to bring to the world is that the collective wisdom of September 2015, that sustainable future cannot have large areas of the world or large sections of any country's population in dire poverty and hopelessness, while others are wallowing in massive poverty, wealth. We must rededicate that this message remains important to us today. We must rededicate that fighting poverty in the most vulnerable societies creates societies which can preempt extremist ideology, militant fatalistic behavior, and that collectively the technology and resources available to mankind today is capable of matching the ambitions of inclusive prosperity.
Thank you. What a powerful way to end it. Well, I'll leave it at that, and I look forward to continuing to follow your journey here at Davos and beyond. And thank you for your time.
My pleasure.